Hello, everybody. Today we have a different meeting with head of one of the Houston Regional Association, and we are here today with president of West Houston Association. I want him to fully introduce himself to you guys, and so Alan, our audience, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Mo. Thanks for having me here. It's great. My name is Alan Steinberg. I'm the president and CEO of the West Houston Association. I'm excited to be here. A little bit of background about myself. I have a PhD in political science. Before coming to the West Houston Association, I used to work at Rice University. So coming from that academic mindset, I like to joke that I'm a recovering academic, trying to be more real world and less theoretical.
Thank you, Alan. And most of our audience, they may know what the West Houston Association is, and I'll be appreciate to talk more about the original association.
Yeah, so West Houston Association started back in late 1970s with the idea of how can we do better in the world of land development. At the time in the late 1970s, development in Houston was a little fast and loose. Streets were overcrowded, schools were full of kids, and how could we just do better? And so we initially started as the Katy Freeway Association with the idea of expanding I-10 in order to move development beyond the reservoirs. Since then, we've really focused on infrastructure and land development needs and continue to this day, 45 years later.
Wow. So that's actually perfect work. So I want to actually ask a couple questions to know what's the rule you guys follow for more clarification. So do you think what role do utilities like water, electricity, sewage, internet play in determining the attractiveness of land for residential and commercial properties?
Yeah, utilities are really key. The world of the land developer is to take this often greenfield land where there isn't anything and to bring that in, to bring in the roads, to bring in the utilities, but obviously the closer they are, the better. So we want to make sure that the water's available, right? So in some places we've had moratoriums on development where they said, we don't have enough water to allow you to develop here. So we want to prevent those types of things. And obviously the better the access to water, the better the access to electricity and even internet, as you pointed out, is important, especially when you're talking about commercial. Data centers are really big now. They have a high energy demand. Commercial users will want high-speed internet. They're not going to want to deal with a slower internet. So all of those factors come into play, and that's really the developer's world, is how do we make those things happen so that the builder or the eventual owner of that property that's going to come in and either build something or buy something that's built by a developer has what they need to be successful.
Perfect. So the second question I write it down to ask is how does the cost of infrastructure development, like roads, water, again, sewage, and electricity type services, affect the financial feasibility of real estate projects in underdeveloped areas, do you think?
Well, of course, if the utilities are available, it makes it more affordable, it makes it easier, it allows more developers the opportunity. When you have more challenging pieces of land where you don't have as much easy access to existing infrastructure or possibly no existing infrastructure, it's going to take more money and it's also going to take more time. And as you're well aware, there's the time value of money. So the longer it takes to get the infrastructure in place, the more expensive it's going to be down the road for that person.
Thank you. It was good point he mentioned out. And also, how do you think can infrastructure investment by local government, in new public transit or green spaces like parks, and boost the property values in underserved neighborhoods?
Yeah, it's very important when the public and private sectors can work together on things like infrastructure. So for example, if you have a more rural community, there's been state funding for internet and for broadband to get that into those communities. It makes it easier to make it more developable in the future because they already have some of those pieces. Same with things like water. A city may already have a water treatment plant, and is there a way for a developer to come in and utilize that existing plant or to build off the existing plant rather than having to create a whole new water plant or a whole new wastewater plant. That would make the timeline faster and development easier and more affordable.
So, do you think are there any specific like zoning change or infrastructure projects underway that could influence the real estate development, especially in West Houston area?
For sure. So one of the things we're concerned about is water, potable water, drinking water. There's been a demand for us to use more surface water, less groundwater to prevent subsidence. Well, that means we need to get surface water to the west area. So right now we're running pipes, all the way from the northeast side across down to get to Fort Bend from the northeast side of Houston, from Lake Houston. Allen's Creek Reservoir is a potential future project that hopefully we can see built in the next 5, 10, 15 years. That would provide ample amounts of surface water for those residents in West Fort Bend County. So as that area develops, really that public-private partnership, if the private sector can maybe help get the public sector to do it a little faster, then it'll be good for the area and it'll allow for smooth, continuous growth.
By my knowledge, it was like always some issues between these, like actually part you mentioned, like having a good communication between like government and private side. Like in recent years, the politician, do they like come up with any new ideas or something to solve these issues?
Yeah, I think it's been a great open dialogue between the public and private sector for years on how can we work together for those infrastructure challenges. Recently, Harry Masterson, a land developer, called it a renaissance, in the sense that the city and the county and the city and the state are really communicating this year more than they have in the past. And the openness over the past few years to working with the private sector has been really great.
What role does the West Houston Association play in influencing local real estate policy or development guidelines?
Well, we really like to see our role as educating. A lot of times you'll have people who end up in office, especially further out from a big city in the smaller towns or in more rural communities, who don't have a lot of expertise in engineering or land development. And so we hope to be able to play that role as an honest broker to say, here is what you want to know, here's what we can understand. And we host forums and sessions. We even have a half-day session each summer, really targeting those decision makers to help them understand what are the different issues and to provide them access to people who can answer their questions.
Perfect. Actually, and last question, you mentioned about developers and builders. So that's, I think, good question to ask. Like, what challenges are like developer and investor builder facing in especially your area, West Houston, and how is the West Houston Association working to like address them?
Yeah, so two of the challenges that I can think of, one started kind of just after COVID, which was utilities, especially electricity, getting transformers, getting things in, a lot of supply chain interruptions. Thankfully, we've seen a lot of that smooth out over the last few years. We've been working with people like Centerpoint and Entergy to discuss those issues and how we can make that better and how we can make that smoother. And then on the government side, it's the permitting process. We're really hoping with the new administration that's taken office and with the openness to ideas at the county and hopefully within other counties, that they can understand what it takes to really get these permits to move faster. Because again, the more smoothly and quickly we can move on the permitting process, the cheaper those initial housing prices will be.
Perfect. So do you think, what are the long-term effects of poor infrastructure on the real estate market, especially in terms of property values, livability, and market demands are?
Yeah, so when you think about poor infrastructure, a lot of it comes down to a lack of planning. Developers often need to have a long-term planning perspective, not just 5 or 10 years, but 20, 40, 50, even further out, so that when an area continues to develop and you get more density, for example, you have mobility infrastructure in place, whether that's roads, whether that's mass transit. How do people get around? Similarly, when we're talking about things like electric, load, how do we make sure there's enough capacity for people and their needs? And same with water, right? So right now, Houston's facing some challenges in regard to that with an aging infrastructure. So not a lack of infrastructure, but as the infrastructure gets older, the need to plan ahead in order to replace that infrastructure so that it'll continue to be there for future generations.
Perfect. And actually, one of the other things personally I really interested to know is like how does the urban sprawl driven by inadequate infrastructure in the city centers affect the real estate market in a suburban area, do you think?
It's an interesting question. I think a lot of times when we have what we think of as this sprawl, when people are moving out to the suburbs, it's not necessarily for infrastructure. A lot of times it's for school districts, the quality of schools. What we saw post-COVID was a lot of people moving out because they wanted to be near green space and park space. The city of Houston with their Bayou Greenways initiative, I think is going to kind of counteract some of that. You'll see some people kind of coming back into the city because there's a great trail structure that's been put in place to kind of offset that demand. But I think you're still going to always see things where people are going to move for in a cyclical pattern as they want maybe a bigger house or they want to be further away from the city. The affordability is further away. And then maybe when their kids leave home or they decide they want to be closer in, they'll move back into something smaller.
Perfect and good point. Actually, the ISTs you mentioned. I didn't write any question about the ISTs, but I think it's good to talk a little bit more about the ISTs in your area as well.
Yeah, so the West Houston area has been blessed in the sense that you have Katy ISD, which is one of the best school districts for a long time. You have a lot of really good growing school districts. Fort Bend has a good track record of success. Lamar ISD in the southwest side has really been growing great. Same with Cy-Fair, also good. And we're even seeing now Waller ISD in the far northwest really investing through bonds in their future.
Perfect. So how does the environmental sustainability in infrastructure, like green buildings, flood protection, and sustainable energy impact demand for the real estate, do you think?
Sustainable infrastructure is really interesting. So there's a market demand in the sense of marketing where people are like, oh, I want to live in a sustainable area. I want to be part of that. I think what we're seeing up in Bridgeland right now, they have a mass timber building that they just put up in their area and they're already seeing it leasing quickly. I think that shows that people want to be part of that kind of movement of a more sustainable world. But at the same time, the ROI isn't quite there yet. Sometimes the costs just offset it. And for some people, that's not going to work for them.
Perfect. So the next question I have is a kind of like governmental question. I want to know like how do government policies and incentives related to infrastructure, like tax incentives for developer, builder, or the ones that new actually developer or builder or a small or local builders in the area affect land development and real estate prices, do you think? Especially in West Houston.
Well, I think incentives are always great, right? We'll always take the incentives. I think where you're really starting to see the movement is where you have a missing piece in that delta between the cost and maybe the return. And so for sustainable infrastructure, we're starting to see the city of Houston and their green stormwater infrastructure incentive program. We're trying to encourage people to do more of that kind of work. I hope that we will see more of that in the future. So far, there's been very few developers who have tried to take advantage of that program. They've been doing some revamping to the program to try to make it a little more accessible. Hopefully, in the years ahead, we'll see more of that. But I think that the incentivization on the sustainability side will really help push developers a little bit further in that world.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alan. And as a last question, I just want to provide one general advice for everybody, like for all of our audience, whoever planning to come to the West Houston, and also even like for builders, developers, even like regular residents. What's your like general advice for everybody? Well, I know it's a hard question, but
general advice to everyone's tough. I think it depends where you are. So from the land developer builder perspective, my advice would be more about collaboration, right? How can we work together, especially setting the stage? So setting the stage with that infrastructure in place makes it easier. So even as a resident of the area or someone looking to move into the area, the more we can work with decision makers and policy makers to invest in the infrastructure, the easier it's going to be for development to come by after, and the cheaper it's going to be on those initial housing prices, because it means we can develop quicker and with less work to get that house done. So if we really want to think about things like housing affordability, how can we remove the red tape? How can we put in solid quality infrastructure so that a developer can come behind and a builder can come behind and put in quality housing or quality retail or even quality industrial product?
And what about regular residents?
And really, as far as everyone else and the regular people, if you will, it's really about finding good quality of life. And one of the things here on the west side is we have a lot of high quality developers putting in great amenities. And so thinking about what is it that you want in order to have a great live, work, and play experience.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much to joining us today, Alan. Also, I have a note at the end of this interview. If you guys see like some regional association, they grow so fast and they are so good. We have like some head people like Alan, they working until now, like for example 8 p.m. For you guys to providing better condition for your life quality. Thank you so much, and thank you, Alan, to joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.